welcome to another episode of We Own the Table. I am Tanya Burke, your hostess with the mostest. And today we have when I say another fabulous sister friend of We Own the Table, of the show. And this woman here, Dr. Ennette Morton, and I said it, Doctor. Let me lean in a little bit more because they always talking about lean in. Let me lean in. Dr. Ennette Morton. When I say this woman has done so many great things, like I have personally seen with my own eyes. You know how people come on the show and you just get this little speaker reel or you get the bio and you just have to go with what you see and what you hope. That's not the case here. I have seen her work with my own eyes. And when I tell you, this is a show that you all want to make sure that you stay around and stick to the very end, because I know Dr. Morton is just going to be dropping nuggets, and I'm not talking about catfish. I'm not talking about chicken. So put your tartar sauce and your hot sauce and your barbecue sauce away, unless that's what you happen to be snacking on. But she's going to be dropping some wonderful nuggets. And I just want to start off by, saying a little bit about her. And she's one of those people where, she's done so much stuff that you have her bio and all that. Like, you actually have to pick it up and read it from the piece of paper. You actually have to read it from the piece of paper because she's done so many great things. And she is one of the, I want to say, the most efficient, effective, and compassionate leaders that I have met. I mean, she's one of the, and when I say the compassion in everything that she does, it shows. So Dr. Morton, she is a higher education leader, and that's why she's here today. She's going to be talking about the trends in higher education. She's a commissioner. She is a past sitting president of the Long Beach Democratic Club. And when I say this woman is doing fantastic things, not only in education, okay, not only in higher education, but also in politics. She even helped start a PAC to make sure that there are more women sitting at the table, because we own the table, ladies. But she created a PAC with a number of other women, and she's leading that effort. And so I could go on and on and on and on. She is also, like myself, a graduate of Pepperdine University. Okay, she got her master's and her doctorate from Pepperdine, and she received her bachelor's degree from Cal Poly Pomona. So Dr. Ennette, okay. Dr. Ennette, I can keep going on. She's, she's an alum of Emerge, California. When I say, and then she's like the recruiter for what's the ordinance? Close the Gap. So she's out there looking for women to run for office. So I can't tell y'all how excited I am to have Dr. Ennette Morton here with us today. And like I said, she's going to be dropping those nuggets for us. So welcome, Dr. Morton.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for that warm welcome. I am so excited to be here. This is such a great platform. So thank you for creating this space so that we women can talk about our accomplishments. And, like you said, we own the table. Don't just bring the chair, bring our own table. So
thank
you for this space.
Oh, you're very welcome. And like I said, it's a pleasure to have you here because, like I said, you're very resourceful, and you always come with with information to better other people, and especially better other women, and especially Black women. And so that's why I'm so happy to have you here today, because education is important, and higher education is important. And I think it's so very important for us to have these conversations, especially now that we have approached, we're in this pandemic, and education is literally changing like day by day, especially higher education is just changing day by day as each day goes by during this pandemic. And a lot of institutions having to, shift and change and mold how they do things in order to uh, address, providing education during the pandemic. But before we get on that matter, I got to go, I got to throw in a little something. I got to do a little something.
Yes.
Talk about this fool that wrote this opinion piece. And just because you have an opinion don't mean you need to put it out there, people. But let's talk about this fool that put out this piece about Dr.
Mhm.
Jill Biden. And the reason why I want to bring this up, because as you being a woman, you having your doctorate, and let me say this, it's hard work. Okay, it's hard work when women go out there, especially women. I'm speaking specifically women, especially women of color, and especially Black women, to go out there and do all the things that they need to do to earn these doctorate degrees. They don't hand them out like bubble gum, or at least most of the institutions I know don't.
Right.
And to be disrespected, but what you know, this article kind of shook the nation, but this isn't anything new. Women, and especially Black women, oftentimes when it comes to education, they're questioned, and it's downplayed. And so I just want to get your opinion about this whole, the disrespect and talking about she shouldn't be called Dr. Jill Biden because she's in the White House. She's just supposed to be, I guess, the wife.
Right. Right. Well, it's so frustrating, and I mean, this isn't anything new. Men have been trying to diminish women's accomplishments for eons, disrespect us, especially when it comes to Black women. But to be honest with you, I think our Vice President elect, Kamala Harris, has men shook because she is a strong, educated, intelligent woman. And so now to diminish that and try to quench that fire, they're starting to hone in on things like Dr. Joe Biden. It's hard. I mean, like you mentioned, you don't just go out and finish a 100-word paper and then you're called doctor. And by definition, doctor means teacher, and that's what Dr. Biden is. That's what I am. Women educators are teachers, and we earned every bit of the right to be called doctor because we're teaching, we're putting out education for kids K through 12, higher education. We're helping in our community, and a lot of these women have done this while they're raising kids, they're caretakers, they're working themselves. So you bring a lot to the table. So to try and diminish and disrespect that title because you're insecure, we're not having it.
Boop, there it is right there. Insecure.
Yeah.
Insecure. And I'm not talking about the show on HBO, but I
Yeah.
love that show as well.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
but really, there is within this last administration, and I'm saying last because I'm putting them behind me.
It's over.
This last administration, there has been an insurgence of insecure individuals who have just uh, come up and just say, oh, it just say, how they say kids say the darndest things. These folks say the damnest things, because they either lack something that someone else has, or they want to downplay people's accomplishments, and that's what this man did. He came across bitter and spiteful and just plain petty,
Yeah.
in regards to the incoming first wife, first lady, and doctor, the first doctor.
Yeah.
But it just was, but like you said, it's not something that's new, but it shouldn't be happening today, in 2020, going into 2021. we shouldn't have to be having these kind of conversations. We should be talking more about, the great things that Dr. Jill Biden will be able to bring to the position that she's going to hold because of her experiences, because of her education. Those are the conversations that we should be having. But instead, we have buffoonery.
Exactly. Well, this administration, more so than any other in history, has really played into the downplaying of education, not promoting the education. Look who they have as the education secretary, for crying out loud. I am looking forward to rebuilding our educational system and having the support that our entire nation deserves. But education itself was one of the things that they were attacking. Why? Because when you have uneducated folks, let's just be honest, when you have uneducated folks, it's easier to lead them around and put in the thoughts that you want them to think. And when you don't think for yourself or have the ability to think for yourself, well, then you can stay in all kinds of power and cause all kinds of trouble. But this is just another reflection of the bad administration that we are putting behind us. And starting in January, hope returns for building our education system, because let's be honest, my big thing is that education is the key to everything. When you have education, you have the ability to choose the life you want for yourself. You have the ability to build what you want to do to take care of your family. You have the ability, you broaden your horizons. You're more inclusive in your thinking. It's really the key to everything. So having a higher education system, in addition to a nice, strong K through 12 education system, you just build a more inclusive, more tolerant society that's engaged and has the ability to engage in things like political happenings, other events, because you're not so focused on just trying to make a life. So with that, I look forward to this administration shepherding in a focus on education again and putting a spotlight on higher education. Specifically, they're talking about bringing free tuition, college tuition to our community colleges, which would be an enormous help for our underserved communities, people of color, especially Black women, our Latinx communities. They need that kind of education, that support to help build their futures. It also helps play into building generational wealth, because now that you have the ability to work and the ability to create the life that you want, you can also help bring up the next generation who can then get more education and go on. Let's be clear too, I'm not just talking about 4-year education. Community college, technical institutions, all of those are also critical to our educational system, because they allow you to build the skills that you want to build. Because everybody isn't interested in going to a 4-year university.
And I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I mean, you mentioned so much. You dropped so much. But I'm glad you brought up the about how individuals not only, it's not just about 4-year education. There's other types of routes or pathways that people can go in to achieve their wishes, their dreams, their career goals, and it doesn't just have to be a 4-year education. And what I am seeing is, and which has always kind of not did us well as a country in our education system, is we have these conversations where it's either this or it's that. So we're either pushing, finish high school, go get a job, and we're against higher education, or we're pushing only go get a 4-year, degree, get your bachelor's degree, and then go get your master's and possibly your doctorate degree. We send these mixed messages to our young folks. And then we also leave people out. A lot of people get left out of the conversation because we do the either or the or, and we don't embrace the, you could do it both actually,
Right.
and so what do you see? Because I'm seeing a lot of, and I understand why we're having more conversations about less about college and more about trade programs or vocational programs, and a lot of it has to do with the insurmountable amount of debt that individuals have, that have gotten their education. Where are you seeing the trends go in terms of higher education?
Well, this is very good, very, very good points. Well, we're moving away from what everybody knows as the traditional student, which is the younger 18 to 24-year-old who just graduated from college, maybe living at home with their parent or have their parents supporting them while they're living at the dorms. We're moving away from that. I mean, since the Great Recession, when all of those jobs were lost, most of which were for people who didn't have higher educational skills, we're seeing more people going back to school to get retrained on skills, to build the skills that they have, to help them with their career progression. So we're seeing more non-traditional, and I'm doing the air quote thing, the non-traditional student come into the educational system. So that's where we're getting the focus on our community college, our trade schools, places like Western Governors University and Capella University, online schools. They're coming into play because more people are looking for ways to build certain skills or to get further or to hone in their skills so that they have better choices. So that's a huge trend in higher education right now. We're seeing, I'd say since the late 90s, we're seeing more schools, almost 55% of schools now support non-traditional forms of education so that they can support the non-traditional students. We're also looking at closing the skills gap, which is critical to helping non-traditional students or adults or adult learners or people who are coming back to school to finish to get their degree, closing the skill gap. So universities are focusing on those kinds of programs so that people can build new skills, to train for new technologies that are coming to play. For example, the big talk is on the Green New Deal and how that's going to create, or we're going to lose jobs. Actually, the Green New Deal is going to create millions and millions of jobs. So we have to train our workforce to be prepared to take on those types of jobs. And that's where it's critical that universities start to focus on embracing the non-traditional learners and building those skill sets and closing those skill gaps.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the whole green, and I'm doing some air quotes. And so many industries, or well, so many business leaders in certain industries, I think is really promoting fear, and how the advancement of how different things are happening in our world, and how we have to make these changes if we want to continue to be able to live on the planet and be able to breathe and drink water and have access to these things. So we have to make
Yeah.
these changes. But having these changes doesn't necessarily mean that there is an elimination of, complete elimination of industries. And oftentimes I have conversations with people like, you need to get the skills that you have to have for the future. And that's the only way that we're going to continue to be. And I don't care what industry you're in,
Yep.
if you're not continuing to learn and grow and continue to get more information about what it is that's changing in your field, you will be obsolete. And those are the people who will have the hardest times when we start to move in these different directions. And
Yes.
these are directions that's inevitable. And so I know that, like, with this pandemic, So many people had an adversity. Oh my goodness, now I have to learn online. Now I have to, I spent years, getting education online because some of the institutions that I went to, they were considered cutting edge years ago, and invested in the online space. And now we have a lot of institutions who now they have no other choice. They didn't have any other choice except for to switch over if they wanted to continue to serve their students. So, do you see, um, in being an administrator in higher ed, are you seeing that there's going to be more of a trend where, one, we have to be more receptive to, like you said, with the Green New Deal and AI and all types of other things, to where we have to shift how we've done things before and shift our focus and getting our workforce prepared for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so proud of my city, Long Beach. We are about to launch a training program to help people train for the logistical jobs that are coming into play because the workforce is changing. So, how transportation is happening, how things are transported from a port of Long Beach to the rest of the country. Lots of logistical pieces and logistical jobs are necessary. So, the city of Long Beach is about to launch a training program to help people get those skills they need to take on those jobs. So yes, that is a big trend in higher education right now, as well as with our political leaders. They're looking for ways to bring people out of jobs across the country where coal is going away. How do we retrain them so that they can then take part in some of the wind energy or nuclear energy, or some of the other cleaner forms of energy that are coming up. All of those types of training programs are now being incorporated into, again, community colleges play a key role in this because they allow people to come in and focus on just those skills or those programs that will help them train for those jobs. Even the society, what is it? The Society of Human Resources has did a study, and they have shown that careers and organizations are recognizing that their workers don't necessarily want to go to get a big degree in theology or theory or whatever, but they want to be trained so they can do better at the jobs that they currently have. So they're starting to invest in their workers and send them to programs that will help them better themselves in the ways that they want to become better. Um, a lot of there's going to be a lot of division of labor coming up, which is another trend. I think they're saying by the year 2022 globally, there's going to be 133 million new roles that will require new training. So starting to ramp, you'll see colleges and universities ramp up to help those who want to get new skills in those areas. But the important thing about this, and you brought it up, you touched on it a little bit, the pandemic has really shown or put a glaring highlight on the inequities that we have in our educational system. How we access education, everybody doesn't have access to education. Everybody doesn't have access to high-speed internet, or high-speed internet is inconsistent. You don't have access to the computers or laptops. And even faculty at higher education institutes are trained on how to put together online programs. You can't just throw videos on or talk for hours in front of students. So the pandemic, if there's a silver lining, and I say that with in a big if, it's shown the spaces, the places that we lack, and how big our inequities are for people of color, Black people, Latinos, um, getting their kids educated, because those areas don't have access to the things that they need to get people educated in the online space.
Well, yeah, you're so right. You're so right. You're so right. And the access piece, and you're right. the pandemic really shined a light on, and a lot of areas where, as a nation, we needed to work on. And the great thing is, we picked up the pieces and we started working on these things instantly, instead of just saying, oh, you know, we've been dealt this bad hand, crying, what they say, crying over spilled milk.
Yeah.
And a lot of, institutions really stepped up
Yes.
to the plate and took leadership and leading in this area of education and making sure that some of the pieces were picked up, and in some cases, maybe not the most seamless process, but people are still able to be educated, and I think that's important to note. And you brought up a great point about how our future and with careers and with education. And so, as a higher education administrator, what part do you see more 4-year universities, kind of dibbling and dabbling in areas where maybe folks start to go to their institutions that's not in search of a 4-year degree? I'm seeing more colleges creating alternative types of educational programs, more certificate-based programs. Some of them do that through their extensions, or they create just a whole nother, department or unit. Are you seeing more of a shift with some of the 4-year universities going in a direction?
I don't see a shift in the 4-year universities doing it, but what I do see are other elements, like for example, LinkedIn stepping up and creating certificate programs that they can then be offered to employers. So employers are creating their own separate university type offerings. Some, because of the way that universities are structured and what they have to, um, the criteria that they have to meet when they're going for the Department of Education, it's hard for them to create certificate programs. It's just not something that all of them are able to do in how they're structured. But private universities are trying to step in and create a space where they work with employers who come to them and say, hey, we need to have a training program on communications, or we want to do a program on getting our staff more literate with online learning, or how to work with in the online space and social media communications. So those types of things, we're seeing a trend towards companies really stepping in and picking up the slack and creating certificate programs for their employees. One, it's good because it helps them retain employees, because once you spend all the time training them on your systems and how you like to do things, you don't want to see them leave. So how do you make them stay and feel appreciated, and that they're continuing to learn? And you do that by creating certificate programs. Um, Companies are also incorporating artificial intelligence in some places, which scares people because it can be seen as something artificial, or people's jobs being lost because machines are taking over. But you got to remember, the machines are only as intelligent as the people who program them and operate them. So incorporating more artificial intelligence or AI for things like answering questions, where before you had somebody on the phone who was there to answer your questions. And I know a lot of us are already seeing this when we call into the banks or someplace else, and we get a person on the line saying, please tell me what you want to ask, and then a machine or a remote thing answers your questions. But you also have to have people to program those and to give the information. So it's give and take. And you're seeing businesses start to pick up on that. Instead of getting rid of their employees, they're bringing in employees and training them on how to make this new online and artificial intelligence work for them.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I not too long ago gave a talk on AI proofing your job
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah,
getting to that reality of uh, don't run from it, don't be afraid of it, but embrace it and learn as much as
absolutely.
you can about it, because those are the individuals who will continue to have a job at the end of the day, or continue to have their career. Those who embrace and learn as much as they can about it and learn how to incorporate those things into their current careers. Um, and so you're so right. You're so right, and especially what you brought up about the different companies stepping up and creating certificate programs. And not only are these programs great for the individuals that work for these different companies, but they're also great for those who are looking to possibly get their foot in the door to work at these
Yeah,
companies. We're seeing so many of these different academies, and then they're working with and affordable, very affordable. Some of these companies have partnered with, like you said, LinkedIn, Coursera, edX, some of these different entities, and they're offering, some really great certificate programs that can get people's foot in the door. And some of these major companies where some individuals have like tried to get in for for ages and
yeah,
just haven't been able to, but they kind of have a leg up by being able to have access to that. And so it's great that we are moving in that direction where the creativity and the innovation that's out there in education, to where we're evolving, and especially as a country, where we're evolving to where there's so much access to education. And so that's why it always disheartens me when so many people, there's access but they don't have access.
yeah,
And I guess, it just it really, burns me up when we just have such, rich resources, but not everybody, is able to have access to those resources. And so, and you brought up when you initially were speaking about, in terms of the changing of the guards with the administration, and the outgoing administration, it just really seemed that there was this tug of war when it came to education. Like everything, financial aid, like everything was always talked about being cut, from special education to everything that so many before us fought so hard to put in place was wiped away, like within minutes, with a, a signature. And so how do you, or if you were in that position, what would you suggest would be the steps that we take as a nation to get us back on track with education?
very, very good point. Well, first of all, we have to put an emphasis on education and see it as something that's just as critical as breathing, because it really is. Again, I pointed out it's the key to everything. When you have an educated person, you have more diversity, you have more broad thinking, more inclusivity for everything across the board. You have people who are engaged in society as opposed to cut off from society. So you really have to put the focus back on education and make it so that it's not seen as something that's a bad thing. Because this administration really has shown that it's something for the haves, and the have-nots have been left out. So we have to make it and put everybody back on equal footing. I remember when my daughter was in high school, and they had to take the test to get into SATs and all of the stuff, and you had to do the prep work. You remember those days prepping your daughters to get ready to go, and we had to go and find this calculator so that she could take part in the math part of it. Well, I finally found the calculator with like $80 on sale at Walmart. And I'm like, what do kids do who don't have parents, A, who can run around the city and try and find the calculator, and how are they going to be able to compete to get into these institutions if they don't have the access to just the basic things? So when we're talking about access to education, I want to be clear that it's not just the fundamentals of the computer and the internet, but it's also just the access to the basic things like pencils, papers, crayons, having a good meal so that you can pay attention. All of those need to be brought back into focus. And this administration, the Department of Administration or Education, has cut out so much of the funding that the schools need to help people get that kind of access to education. So that's one. We have to restore those programs that can help just with the basic needs for education and the schools getting to their students what they need to be ready to learn. The next thing is getting your kids ready to learn. And that's what preschool is all about. You learn how to learn. And that's a critical component that we have to build back that has been cut out of a lot of our educational programs and systems. And then finally, funding. We really got to address the rising cost of education, because that in the end, you can do all of those other things right. But when you have education that's so prohibitively expensive, that is where we got to really work on alternative ways of funding. In California, we have California College Promise, which has been the benchmarker or the foundation and the model that's been used across the country, where if you go through high school and you do all of these things correctly, your community college education is paid for, and then you have a leg into any other higher education systems that you want to go to with funding, as well as being considered for admissions. So those types of things, we need to start fostering those and looking for ways to incorporate those kinds of things into all of our educational systems across the country. So those are the things, if I were education secretary, or
we're just gonna speak that into existence.
Right, I'm just gonna
we're just gonna stick that on it. Yeah, we're just gonna put that on out there and have
if I was a secretary of education, those are the top priorities that I would work on. Preschool funding sources, and making sure that everybody has those access to just the basic needs to get education.
Yeah, and you brought up such a great point, and me and my husband, us being parents, we've had 3 kids. Two of them have gone on to college, graduated from college. Our last one, she's in college, and speaking of that, I'm representing, because we're talking about higher education. I am representing her through Langston University. Go Langston. So that's why you see me changed up a little bit today, because I wanted to represent. But being, parents of students, it's very hard. There were many times, especially her senior year, when they started talking about the senior projects and the senior activities and the different things in education, and was looking at the price sheet of a lot of the stuff, and then looking at the cost of even just applying to colleges.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, are we going to have to mortgage the house, just to get through the senior year,
Right.
because it's so expensive. And like yourself, the first thing I thought was, I am so grateful, and that we have been in a position financially to be able to provide our daughter with those things that she needed and wanted, not just needed, but wanted.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are so many families that don't and can't. And education is very expensive, and it's getting more expensive, every year. And just even when I was in college, and that was many moons ago, I have enough student loans to be able to buy a small village for an island. So I can
I hear
understand.
ya.
So I can understand Also too, and sometimes the reservation with students, especially some of our younger folks who are just like, that's not in the cards for me.
Yeah.
Um, and we were seeing that pre-pandemic. What do you think we're going to be seeing? Kind of after the dust settles and we kind of move a little bit more, beyond the pandemic, because we see on the news every day so many people are unemployed. People financial status may not be the same, but their children or even they still have a desire to be educated, beyond high school. So where do you see us going um, in higher education to make sure that, really no one gets left behind because of this pandemic?
It's a really sad and tough situation because it was already a struggle for people to get into college, as you mentioned, but just making sure that the children have the basic education that they need to get out of high school into higher education is a concern because a lot of kids aren't getting the education that they need from the online platforms that they're using because myriad of reasons. Teachers aren't very skilled or accustomed to teaching in the online environment. The ones that are really creative and have adjusted quickly are helping their students, but students are struggling. I mean, with their mental health, with social skills, reading, and math is the number one critical thing that students are falling behind in an online environment. So just trying to get everybody beyond and ready to go to a higher education um, institution, organization. And then our higher education organizations are struggling financially because enrollments are down, um, place things that help supply, feed in their financial things like dorms, extracurricular activities, sporting events, um, food services. All of those have been decimated because kids aren't on campuses, and when you're online, you don't need dorms. You don't have that. You don't have that source of income, so they can only rely on their tuition and enrollment costs, and those don't cover everything. So being able to cut tuition expenses is really going to depend on those universities who can raise money and who have a donor base who can help those sorts of funds. So it's going to be a struggle for quite some time. Higher education is going to take a huge hit because the funding isn't there. And then, states who typically can help supplement some of that funding, they're being decimated because of the taxes. So it's going to take, I would say, the next 5 years before we actually fully recover so that we can see a financial benefit to help students beyond scholarships and things like that. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna take all of us working together to make sure that our students have what they need and paying attention. School board meetings are so critical in every city, including your college board of trustees. Who are those people who you're electing to those seats? I know a lot of people think that we always say it, politics are local. And when it comes to higher education and education, it's so true. Because who's on your school boards? Who are those people who are influencing how your K through 12 education is going? Who are those trustees who are on your college board to help your community colleges supplement and help your community? And then look at who your regents are at the state level with your governor. Who are those people who you've elected to speak for you when it comes to your higher education, and or your children's education? So just looking across from now through the next decade, you really got to pay attention to those things as well as looking for alternative ways to fund education.
And I'm so glad you brought that up. you know, even the conversation about how we are seeing the trickle down in the education, the field of education in terms of, you know, we really don't look at it of all the different uh, wheels that's turning behind the scenes in terms of keeping these educational institutions afloat. But it's really a well-oiled machine that has to be well funded in order for these things to continue to happen, and also just not only for our students to be able to have a place to be educated, but even people to have a place to be employed.
Absolutely.
We've seen so many of these. There hasn't been a lot of talk about it, but so many educational institutions have had to lay off mass numbers of their employees because of they're not getting the parking fees, they're not getting the dorm fees, they're not getting the meal plans, they're not getting all of these different things that they typically receive that really is really the meat of what funds a lot of these institutions,
Hmm.
and they're not seeing that, and as a result, a lot of people who have, you know, played roles in making sure that these uh, these schools are able to maintain and people be safe
Yeah.
and clean and effective, and you know, have unfortunately had to be let go. And like you said, if you don't have a chancellor or a president or a foundation uh, staff that's able to raise money like nobody's business, it's going to be very difficult for some of these schools to keep their doors open. And even the ones who have been very successful at fundraising, there's only so much
There's only so
uh,
much you can do.
that can be done. And especially, you know, I want to touch on a little bit too about the historically black colleges.
HBCUs.
Yeah, because a lot of them uh, just they don't get some of the funding that a lot of the other institutions get to. They don't have the large endowments. You know,
Hmm.
lately we've been, you know, hearing in the news about different businesses and individuals donating large amounts of money to a lot of these institutions. Just like Bezos, she just recently, you know, gave I mean, so much money, like millions and
Millions.
millions and millions of dollars to several HBCUs. But what people fail to really, and then people say, "Oh, well, that's great. Then the HBCUs got money now." And it's like, no, because there's a lot of them who don't make those lists and who don't make the cuts. And like my daughter's school, for one. Um, and she's always complaining, Mom, time and time again, it's the same schools who are always getting the money, and those other schools are being left off the table, and that's still happening. And then on top of that, don't receive the necessary state funding that the other counterparts, the other schools are getting, and
Hmm.
so we have to keep that in mind too if we want to continue to see any of our institutions' doors remain open. You
Yeah.
know, whether it's online, brick and mortar, funding is needed. So it's important that we play our role and we donate um, to higher education. We donate to these different schools. You know, if you're an alum, give back to, you know, to the school where you attended. If you have children, give to the school, even though you're paying
Yeah.
tuition.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
it's those dollars that go a long way. And when we collectively come and do those things together as a people, then we take care. We say what we say. We take care of our own, and so it's important for us to remember that it starts with us. And like you said, politics is local, and the same thing is where you put your money in terms
Exactly.
of it being local. But it has been an absolute pleasure, Dr. Morton, and then it's always a pleasure. I always look forward to meeting with you and talking to you because you just are very insightful um, in every topic that you talk about. And how can the We Own the Table Sister Friend family, how can they find you? How, if they want to reach out to you, how can they find your information?
Well, you can. It's simple. I'm on all the platforms. Facebook, I'm Ennette Morton. On Twitter, I'm at Ennette M. Instagram, Ennette Morton or eMorton07. And on LinkedIn, I'm Ennette Morton, EDD.
So there you have it, y'all. She gave all her information. Now don't be DMing me 2, 3 o'clock in the morning talking about I need Dr. Ennette's information. I need Dr. Morton's information, and you didn't even pay attention and listen and write it down.
Yeah.
So say it again for me, Ned. Say it again. Because sometimes
Face,
you have to hear it more than once.
right. Facebook, Ennette Morton. LinkedIn, Ennette Morton, EDD. Twitter, Ennette M, at Ennette M. And on Instagram, eMorton07. And if you need to email me, it's Ennette11 at gmail.com.
All right. You guys have it. There it is. So before we round on out, Ennette, is there anything that you're working on in the future? There's something, because you're always busy. You always got something going on, whether it's politics, education, women's empowerment, women's leadership. You always got something going on. So, is there anything that you're working on that you want to share with the sister friend community?
Absolutely. Well, as you know, I'm very passionate about women's leadership. So I am working on a book on the women who are leading the charge for change. So I'm looking at the Black women who are leading the charge for change. And that book should be coming out shortly. I'm taking a step back from some of the other things that I'm passionate about so that I can finish this because it's just so critical to make sure that our younger generation sees us. They're seen in what we're doing, and they have role models to look up to. So that should be coming soon.
Oh, that's terrific. I am so happy for you. That is music to my ears because it's needed. It's needed. And I know you're going to do the subject matter justice. And because I know that you walk it like you talk it, as they say. I'm not gonna break it down like that, because I'm not that young anymore. But you you practice what you preach and you walk it like you talk it. And so I'm looking forward to reading the book, promoting the book, selling the book, slanging them out my trunk if I have to make sure it's a bestseller. But it's something that's needed. Uh, that's needed out, especially right now,
Yeah.
especially at this the times that we're going through. It's needed, and so I know it's going to be an instant success. So again, I thank you for being on the show. I thank you for sharing your knowledge, your information, and your wisdom to our fellow sister friends out there. And all our sister friends out there, thank you for watching the show. And We Own the Table airs Thursdays at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Every Thursday Pacific Standard Time. We're on Roku. We're on Apple TV. We're on Android TV. We're on, you name it, we're streaming there. We're on Fire TV. So you can always reach We Own the Table, and also we're on social media as We Own the Table because we own the table. We don't have to beg, borrow, or steal to have a seat at the table because we own it. And I also wanted to say we're celebrating today because this is our last episode of the season, our first successful season of We Own the Table, and it was fitting to have Dr. Ennette Morton round us out for our last episode of the season. So look forward to more to come next season. And so thank you again, Dr. Ennette Morton. And again, another great episode of We Own the Table. See you
Thank
soon.
you.